So we have, okay, I'm going to see if I can pronounce this properly in Catalan. Aleix Welsh, CEO of Mobile World Capital. Now, what Mobile World Capital does is they founded an event alongside Mobile World Congress in Barcelona called 4YFN. And what Mobile World Capital does is focus on products and services for startups, a platform to sell the company, and you've just launched an investment vehicle. PhD in engineering and math, so you're smart. And then one little fact, you have one daughter on the way on the day your event begins in February. Oh, we need a microphone for Aleix. I'll give you this for now.
You need to go to the mic.
Yeah, I'll just give this to you.
Okay, perfect.
So if the panelists could come up, please.
The mic. Yeah, you need to go there. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. A pleasure to be here for the invitation of the organizers. An awesome event. I will really like to thanks to the panelists. Some of them, they are waiting for the mic. We are going to start a panel about how building a startup nation. That means, or the focus, or the topics we want to cover is how cities or countries can create strategies, public or private, about create innovative ecosystems. As you know, it's really difficult to crack the recipe to leverage on the assets that a city or a region, they have it in zone, and take it the digital revolution, take it all the startup community, all the startup culture, and create something that makes sense for a region. A lot of times when you are in these panels, you are asked if you are trying to be Silicon Valley, and we can discuss about this question, because always raise, and how sick sometimes you are, or be asked for this question. I will introduce a little bit myself. I'm Aleix Welsh. I was introduced by the MC. I'm the general manager of 4 Years From Now. 4 Years From Now is a platform who's helping startups from around the world to do two main simple things. Selling your product or service, because revenue is important, and selling your company. It means meeting investors. We do that in a global basis, and we are waiting all of you for the next Mobile Congress in February. It will be a pleasure to see you again in Barcelona during the last week of Feb. I will ask to the rest of the panelists to introduce themselves, and we can start to crack how to build that startup nation.
I have a micro. Does it work? Okay. Good morning. My name is Marco Bicocchi Picchi, and I'm the president of the Association of the Italian Startups. We have more than 1,000 members, from startups to incubators, accelerators, investors, and we have as members also large companies that are interested in open innovation and in dealing with startups. My background is a business angel. I was the business angel of the year in Italy in 2014, so I'm an investor, and I started my career as a manager, and I transitioned from management to entrepreneurship and angels in 2008.
Great. Good morning, my name is Danny Lopez, and I work for UK Trade and Investment, UKTI, which is the foreign commercial arm of the UK government. We have two missions in life. We help British companies do more business overseas, and we work hard to attract the very best of foreign direct investment into the UK. I work out of New York, and I head up our operation in the US, where we've got 130 people focused, as I say, in promoting trade in both directions. And we have been very focused over the last few years in helping attract the very best of tech, entrepreneurial, and startup talent into the UK from the US.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Igor, and I'm from Moscow. I'm representing Skolkovo Foundation. We are a non-profit organization, and our major goal is to drive the innovation ecosystem in Russia. So currently, we support 1,000 startups in 5 areas, which is ICT, energy efficiency, biotech, nuclear, and space. So I'm heading information technology cluster. And under our umbrella is 400 ICT companies. Some of them you can find here in the gallery. And I joined Skolkovo 3 years ago, and before that I spent 20 years in the information technology industry. And I came from SAP, being CEO of SAP Russia.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. You are working on a regional basis. You are working more focused on New York City, and as far as I understand, you are working more in Moscow area. Then let's start. What are the key ingredients that you identify and you need at some point to put on the recipe to start to build and see critical mass and exponential growth in an ecosystem related to startup culture or innovation? Which thing are the key things you need to put attention with? Marco, you want to start?
Yes. As you know, the theory of ecosystem has been well developed, and there is academic research also, for example, from Professor Eisenberg. And so I want to tell you what you need in an ecosystem. Our experience is that you need to have all the parts coming together, which means you have the talent that decides to go for entrepreneurship instead of trying to be hired somewhere in a big corporation. So it's first of all, a choice of people to be entrepreneurs instead of being employees. Mm-hmm. Second, you need the capital, because without capital, you cannot grow companies that are not revenue generating and have to go fast to grow. You need support from research and university, and so education, and we all in Europe face also a talent shortage in terms of developers and programmers, and that is no exception. And finally, you need an environment from the government point of view which is as liberal as possible and cut down on the red tape. So in Italy, in the last years, we had some legislation that was drafted to help the ecosystem develop. Although I must say that these have helped us, it's also still in a tradition of regulating rather than deregulating. So I have some envy for the UK environment. I would like to be more similar to that. Yeah. Talents have been coming to the because alternative of being entrepreneur is becoming more and more interesting for young people, but also not so young. In fact, one of the characteristics of the Italian system is that our average age is more in the range of 40 years old rather than the 25. But we have both, and in a few years now we have more than 5,000 startups that have registered in the special section of the Chamber of Commerce for innovative startups from a small number. So I would say we are growing progressively, although our main challenge is to link in the hubs of innovation and capital and attract more capital from foreign investors.
Yeah. Now, how do you see New York?
Well, actually, I was going to build on that because, I mean, clearly I fully agree that talent, capital, education, knowledge, all of them brought together are absolutely key. I think it's quite interesting to then think of the role that government can play in making sure that ecosystems flourish. And there are many people who will say, well, government should just stay aside and not get involved at all, and literally just let all of that happen. But if you look at Tech City here in London over the last few years, which I think is a very interesting case study, you see that actually government realized that this was happening, that there was a certain movement, that a few dozen companies were growing pretty significantly in Tech City. It was close to the capital in the city of London. But then there are a number of things that can be done to actually make that much bigger. And you can introduce investment in infrastructure and technology, and essentially providing an environment for companies to feel more comfortable in. You champion the message overseas and make sure that people all over the world realize that there's something going on around the Old Street Roundabout. It's very important, it's very special, and then all of a sudden there's a buzz and there's momentum around the world. It's creating a culture where entrepreneurs feel like this is the right thing to do. And if you look at London over the last few years, there have literally been thousands and thousands of companies being set up because the attitudes to risk in this country have changed pretty significantly too. So it's important that you're convincing young people that this is an area that they should be part of, but also kids by curriculums and making sure that coding is part of the curriculum, etc. All of a sudden starts changing the culture pretty significantly. So you're creating an environment for entrepreneurs in which to flourish. You're championing the message overseas. You're investing in the infrastructure, and all of that put together with obviously the very important parts of the ecosystem, capital, talent, etc., becomes a very powerful proposition.
Your turn. Igor.
Yeah, so I think that there are two major elements for the startup ecosystem, and I agree with Marco. This is about good education and entrepreneurial spirit in the society. And I think that Israel is a great example about that. So small country actually producing thousands of startups which become very successful. Speaking about Russia, we have a lot of good talents, well-educated people, but entrepreneurial spirit is not so high. And that is why actually our foundation has been established, and we help the people from the science, from the universities, from the institutions to become technology entrepreneurs, to build their own, I would say, scientific startups, first of all, because our country is quite rich about mathematicians, programmers, engineers. So I think that what we need to build as a country, we need to build entrepreneurial spirit, and this is what we are focusing on.
Okay, one short questions based on your comments. There is a way to create vertical ecosystems. It means London is trying to position and spread the wall as the fintech, if you want, startup ecosystem in a global basis. Is in the future we're going to see cities or regions trying to create its own innovation ecosystem in a vertical basis, taking a sector, a technology, and trying to be relevant in something, or is something that it doesn't make any sense at all?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, clearly London is not just fintech. In a way, for me, London is excelling in the areas where data and services converge. So that is clearly happening in fintech, but it's also happening in medtech, and it's also happening in edtech, and a number of other spaces. So again, that combination between data and services is what London has to offer, and the rest of the UK has to offer. But there's far more too. I mean, picking up on fintech, for example, I think that London, I would say this, of course, but I do believe very strongly that London has this opportunity to become a global leader in fintech, actually in the short to medium term, because we have in this city the capital, the innovation, and the regulators all in one space. And if you look at the US, for example, now, which of course is trying to also race ahead in fintech, you've got regulators in DC and Chicago, you've got the capital in New York, and you've got innovators in the Valley as well as other areas. I think we've got this tremendous opportunity in the UK and London within fintech, but as I say, where data and services converge. And to your point, it makes sense that you're going to excel in a number of sectors depending on what your background and areas of excellence are. And you pick cities like New York and London, who have traditionally been so strong in financial services, in media, in fashion, for example. It makes sense that mobile technology, which is disrupting all of those, will mean that they will excel in the next generation of what those sectors have become.
Okay. You want to about the entrepreneurial spirit is something that we always listen in a lot of panels about. In the States, they have the entrepreneurial spirit. They don't have a fear to fail. But in Europe, it's an open question. How we're able to take the young generation and help them to be entrepreneurs and lose that. What is the recipe to address that if you have it? And I can copy to take it to Barcelona. Who want to take the risk?
I think that one key element is the melting pot. I think that the successful ecosystems are a combination of people coming from different countries and different cultures, because you can't have one single culture to fill all the roles of being creative, of being entrepreneurial, of being analytical, of being good operational. So I think one thing that is good in Italy that we have done is to have a startup visa program, which helps entrepreneur coming from outside the European space to come and have authorization, say permit, residence permit with a fast track, which is directly managed by the Ministry of Economic Development. And I think if, say, for example, we're saying in Russia you have a lot of people that are talented in mathematics, in programming and things. And in Italy, we have a lot of people that are talented in being creative and willing to entrepreneur. The best thing is to put them together and in a place. And if you want to Michael Porter was writing about the competitive advantage of nations, and then he was writing about the Italian system of the districts. Today, everybody is looking at it's more the big cities that are coming to be hubs of economic development, and so we talk about competitive advantage of cities rather than nations in a sense. And I think for countries like Italy, the challenge is that we have still districts that are excellent in, for example, area of medical, area of fashion or thing like that. So we are a little different from the big hubs, a city like New York or like Paris or Berlin and things like that. So I think the two things to look at is how to melt and put people together that comes from different cultures and origin, and whether there is only one way, which is the big cities, or there is also a way of smaller hubs, but very specialized.
Want to add something?
So I think that for our companies, the biggest challenge is that they're still trying to be local. And it's quite difficult for Russian companies to overcome this barrier and to become really European or global companies. First of all, it's about language barrier, definitely. And I think Italy actually feel the same. The other problem is that our market looks pretty big for our startups, so 150 million people looks like a big market. But at the same time, it's just only 2% of the global market, and this is what we're telling to our startups. So you need to take off as fast as possible, and you need to go global as much as you can. And for this, I think that this kind of events and the opportunity to network with your peers from the other countries is a great opportunity for the startups to build the partnerships and to become really global. And it's a great opportunity for any country, for any company.
Okay.
I think just very briefly, I was mentioning this earlier, attitudes to risk in this country have changed dramatically over the last 4 to 5 years. In a way, obviously 2008 was such a difficult year for so many companies and people all over the world, but it had that trigger effect to change the way people thought about their careers, their futures, what they wanted to do, how they wanted to start their careers. Governments started to realize that they needed to rebalance the economy differently, and that tech played a very big role in all of that. And I think we sort of beat each other up a lot in Europe about the fact that we're not as entrepreneurial, and I have that same spirit that you have in the Valley. But we've changed a lot over the last few years, and you see that with VC companies here in London, how those attitudes to risk and that change have actually been translated into looking at valuations rather differently. Not as you would in the Valley, but we're heading in the right direction. And the only thing that I would add is the importance of having a poster child, and a lot of them. And for the young kids, Nick Delosio, for example, with Sumbly, 18, 19, when people started knowing about him, what he achieved just had a huge impact, because a lot of people in this country realized that they could probably do something similar, or at least they will try and do something similar. And the moment you have a few of those, and then they grow internationally, then it has a massive impact. And then the final thing I would say is the importance of scaling, which I think is a big challenge for everybody in Europe, frankly. I mean, clearly the US has done this very successfully for years now. We have achieved masses over the last 5 years. The entrepreneurial culture has changed, and thousands of startups have been created. But when it comes to scaling, we still haven't got there. And there's only a sort of handful of companies that really have truly become unicorns. And I think that's our big challenge for the next few years.
Then, for the other panelists, how relevant are the unicorns for the ecosystems as a strategy to position your ecosystem? There is a lack of European unicorns, how relevant they are based on the European mentality. I have sometimes discussions about if a case of success for Italy or for Barcelona, it will be a unicorn who flies to the United States and do a big round, or is somebody who has to stay in Barcelona and has to do everything from Barcelona. The unicorn, sometimes it can be a story of success for some ecosystems, but maybe cannot be understood at the same way. What is your thoughts about getting that European unicorns and position the ecosystems?
I think that Europe, in general, it's made of small and medium enterprises, and 90%, 88% of our enterprises are small and medium enterprises that are also successful. In a sense, the idea of the unicorn is something very attractive also for the media and for some of the people in the finance that are living out of big tickets that are percentage of the biggest is the best. But for the economic ecosystem of Europe, I don't think it is essential to have to replicate the model of the unicorns, although for sure it excites and it attracts maybe more capital. But it is more essential to have a steady flow of exits in the range of the 10, 15 millions that are on a monthly basis in numbers of tens or hundreds. That will be rejuvenating the system of the small and medium enterprises. Maybe mergers in this space will help the change of generation of the entrepreneurs that were successful in the 70s, 60s. And then a few exceptions of unicorns that can grow out of it. It's welcome, but I don't think it is the focus that we should work on.
Thank you very much. Igor, in Russia, about unicorns and how you see the effect, or if it's the way of the case of success of entrepreneurs.
Actually, so I do not expect a lot of unicorns in the next 5 years in Russia, because actually it takes time. I mean, the whole ecosystem needs to be more developed. The whole market needs to be changed, because first of all, the companies should grow on the local market. I mean, to gain the experience and then to go global. And I think that Russia is not so strong as a market for the startups yet. And it comes to the big Russian corporations because they are not ready yet to work with the small startups, because this is another culture. Because I met with colleagues from UK, and I feel like UK companies are keen to talk to the startups, to work with them, to implement the pilots. So it's not the case yet in Russia. But we are working on that, and we push the corporations from the other side to work with the startups, to buy from them, and to gain this unique competitive advantages that they cannot get from big companies like from IBM's or Accenture's.
Okay, let's do an exercise. Let's fly 10 years on time, 10, 20, whatever you like. What is going to happen in 10 years, 15 years from now with the startup culture? Is a hype, is something that is going to stay? Is because the crisis is pushing people at some point at European level to look another way to find its own business, but we will see economic recovery, and in 10 years we will forget about this idea to build the startup nations and it will be another thing? Or is something that is here to stay, a new economy, a new way to do business? What is your vision about that?
So the UK will be the leader in technology across the world in every vertical.
Okay, that's for sure. That's for sure. Definitely sure.
Look, I think
Barcelona Football Club will keep being the best football club.
I think, I mean, it's fascinating to sort of look at the future and see what might or might not happen. I would like a few unicorns, by the way, because I completely agree with both of you, but I also think that having a few shows a certain maturity and shows that the journey, is continuing as it should. I think, to your point, is it here to stay? Absolutely. I mean, the founders of TransferWise were saying the other day that they expect that 30% of all international payments over the next 10 years will be done by non-banking institutions. And whether that is right or is wrong, it just shows how financial services, just to pick one, is being disrupted on a massive scale. And with the technology as it is right now, the best brains are operating in rather small companies, and they have the ability to change their industry massively. So yes, it's here to stay. I think the culture will get stronger and stronger. I think for people like us, it's all about making sure that we're able to provide the right environment for all of this to continue to grow. It's not just about looking to the short to medium term. We've spoken about education. That is absolutely crucial. If we don't get that part right, then we might be successful in the next few years. But if the next generation doesn't build on the success that we've got right now, then why are we doing this in the first place?
Exactly.
So to sort of, I think we could all speak about this for a very long time, but I would say to you, yes, it's here to stay. It will evolve. It will get stronger and stronger. It will disrupt every single industry that we're all operating in, and it's a very exciting time.
Italy, 15 years from now.
If you go back 20 years, it's 1994, it's the first browser, Netscape Navigator. It's dial-up. So if you project yourself 20 years, you are brave, because nobody would have imagined 20 years ago that we would have been looking on our screens, videos, movies on the GSM. And the band would not be enough, and whatever obstacles someone could conceive. So I think definitely the world is changing. It's in difficult, also accelerating change. So startups will be there also because the financial system is changing dramatically. So you cannot count now on debt as much as you were in the past. Europe towards the US is much more unbalanced towards debt for companies than equity. But this is changing with the global regulator. And in the banking system, the Basel 1, 2, 3 and stuff like that. And this is a major force in change.
Russia.
So actually, I believe in startup approach. And if you take the situation, 10 years ago in Russia, everybody wanted to work for big companies. The best talents were trying to join, Sberbank, Gazprom, whatever. So now we see a lot of people who would like to start their own business, and what is more important, the technology change make this entrance barrier is very low, so you can start very, very easy. At the same time, we are sitting here and we represent different institutions who support the entrepreneurs to start their own startups. And I think that in the end, it's all about competition. So today, the large companies, they can develop, they can build their own competitive advantage only through working with the startups. Because as I said, actually, if you address any big global player now, you can get the best practices from the other business, but not the unique value proposition. That's why I believe the startup movement will just grow.
Okay, we have 3 minutes to finish the panel. I would like to open, if you like, some questions from the audience, if somebody has a question. Yes, we have a question there.
Dan Martin from Enterprise Nation, our founder, started Startup Britain, which is the UK campaign for this stuff. The UK government this week announced that it's closing down the Business Growth Service following the spending review, which is Growth Accelerator, which is the main program for growth startups, and putting money into helping private sector support companies deliver support for startups on a local level. Do you think that's a reflection of government stepping back even further and relying on the private sector delivered support?
No, I think there are hundreds of initiatives right now supporting small startups, small and medium-sized startups across the country. And like everything, some will reach a level of maturity and come to an end. Some will evolve and include more private sector sponsorship, support, etc. And a number of other new ones are emerging too. And we saw a whole bunch of initiatives emerge last week as a result of the autumn statement. So I think you will find that the UK government will remain incredibly committed in the space. I was in Manchester, for example, yesterday, and I was hearing about the success of Media City over the last 4 to 5 years, which has been tremendous. The BBC now has 3,000 people there. They were the anchor tenant, but there are now 4,000 people from another 80 companies in the media space, many of whom have come through with public sector support and also through private sector support. So, no, you will see a number of initiatives end, and you will see a whole bunch of other ones start. What doesn't go away is the support that the government will play in the space.
One last question. We have 1 minute. There is more question? We have one there.
Hi, I'm Laura Castrillo. I'm a director of analytics at Possible. We're a creative agency, and I was wondering when you were talking about talent shortage. Yeah? That better? Okay, sorry. So I work as director of analytics in a creative agency, and when you were talking about talent shortage, which is also something that we face, and also having grown up in Southern Europe, where now we're struggling with high unemployment, have you seen any good examples of initiatives that have been able to take a large portion of people that don't have jobs, but then provide them the skills to be able to fill that talent shortage, or any examples of things that could help in that space?
Who want to take it? Talent shortage.
Talent shortage. It's a big challenge because it's like demography. If you don't have kids, you don't have young adults. So I think that very good is what I'm doing with the Coder Dojos, the education for young kids to program and to make familiar the system. But in the short term, there are initiatives like academias and programs, but not enough. I think that especially the regional government are putting too much attention in bringing money into startups instead of educating people. Because if you have the talent and the educated people, then the capital is abundant in the private sector, and it will finance. I think we need more policies to infrastructure in terms of, in certain regions also, broadband, but especially talent. So something is on the going, but not enough.
Okay. We are already 2 minutes over time. Thank you very much to the panelists. A pleasure. Thank you very much.